of what is called Russell Speirs and Friends. I'm Russell Speirs, and Ewan here is my friend for today. Not just for today, of course. I'll introduce Ewan in a moment, but for those of you who don't know, this is a series of conversations that I have with friends that I've made over what's coming up for 25 years or more actually now in education. And I get to know them again a bit and ask questions about what they do and their background. And then what I'm doing is asking all of my guests, all of my friends, one particular question, which is what they think helps a school to thrive. And then we explore a little bit what that means in practice. So today, as I say, my friend is Johan Jensen. Ewan, you're the founder and a director of All In Education. Have I got that right? And also, have I got the pronunciation of your first name right? Because I don't always get it right, do I?
A good guide is you and then number one. Johan.
Johan, okay. And that's a Swedish name, isn't it?
It's a Swedish name, yes, where I've been brought up and I was born.
Yes, of course. So tell us a little bit about All In Education. So what do you do? Tell us a bit about the company.
So All In Education, I founded All In Education in 2018. And our mission was to support schools in the independent and also in the maintained sector to create more diversity and more inclusive work and learning places. And of course, that is a broad spectrum of work. It includes work around pupil outcomes, pupil experiences, but also staff performance, experiences, and well-being. So, and also, of course, the wider community with parents, governors, and leaders. So we work with a broad spectrum of stakeholders, but with one vision, and that is to create the right foundations for more diversity and more inclusion.
Look, before we get into that in a bit more detail, maybe I should ask you, it's actually a question that we do ask candidates in jobs, actually. Of course, this is not that kind of interview, but we often ask them, what would you like us to know about you? It seems like a good question to ask to give people an opportunity to kind of say whatever they want, really. So what would you like us and the people, us watching this to know about you before we start talking a bit more detail about your work?
Do you know what, that reminds me of icebreakers that I did so much in the past. And when I answered that question of an icebreaker, I said, the one thing that you may not know about me is that I've broken my left arm 8 times. I'm not going to go into detail because we don't have time for that, but 8 times I've broken my arm.
Wow.
Apart from that, well, I grew up in Sweden and I was born in Sweden. My family still lives in Sweden, but I moved to this country when I was 17 to do my sixth form. And I never really left. I did a stint of teaching in Ecuador, but I've stayed in Britain since then, and I've lived in different places in Britain, in Birmingham, in Wales, and in London. I am married. I'm married to my wonderful husband, and we have a young daughter, a young adopted daughter. Who came to our family when she was 5 months old, and we celebrated her 5th birthday on Saturday.
Fantastic.
So maybe that's what I want you and the listeners to know.
Right.
That's what's important to me.
Yeah, lovely. Well, thank you for telling us that. So how did you get into this work, which is more than just your work? Obviously, it's your mission, isn't it, really? How did you get into this? And I mean, was there a particular moment or maybe like an experience that told you this is what you need to do? Because I think you've worked in this area all your adult life, really, haven't you? The area of equity and equality and inclusion and diversity.
It is. I think there are kind of 2 very perhaps even 3 key moments in my career. My first key moment was when I was 14 and I was still in school, and I set up a support group with my friend for people who felt excluded. So we had like a little surgery at school, and people could just come there if they felt any sense of exclusion. I think we had maybe 2 or 3 people coming during the term that we did it. But that was, I saw that there was a need, potentially, that I could help, which of course strayed a little bit into kind of savior. But I thought that there was something there that the school wasn't really providing for the young people. The second moment is my sixth form college, which is, and you will be very familiar with this, that is UWC
Yes.
of the Atlantic, which is in Wales, which is a school that brings together 360 sixth form students from 90 different countries. And the big aim of that school is to bring people together from different cultures, different religions, different backgrounds, to learn from each other and bring that back to their countries and spread what they've learned. That was a huge moment for me, in knowing what the power of diversity is, and even more importantly, the power of inclusion. So to make sure that people's voices are being heard, and that different people's voices contribute to decision making, and that makes for richer and better decision making. My third moment happened in 2017, where I had spent my career working on equity in different forms. But in 2016 to 2018, I was working in the business sector, primarily in financial institutions, pharmaceuticals, and others, consulting on matters relating to equity, diversity, and inclusion. What I saw there was something that I'd never seen in education, because I'd been working in education previously. I had not seen the type of initiatives and also debate and discussions taking place in education like I did in the business sector. And that got me thinking. And it got me thinking on the path of, I think there's something that we can do here to support schools in a better way when it comes to issues of diversity and inclusion, in recruitment, talent management, and of course in the business sector, it's product development. But I would say in education, of course, that is curriculum development, teaching and learning, that we can do something there that will propel, improve inclusion, a sense of inclusion and belonging amongst pupils and staff, and then also, of course, diversity. So I think that's a really important moment. And it came from a coaching session I had with a very senior executive in an American bank, who asked the question, so what's happening around diversity and inclusion in education? That was one coaching session, and that got me thinking about this and reflecting what is happening in business, what is happening in education, or not happening in education.
It's great that you can trace it back like that so powerfully. So anyway, you're now the owner and the director and a key part of All In Education. And so I think I probably know what you're gonna say. Well, we'll see. But I want to ask you now the question that this podcast series is kind of all about in some respects. So it's what do you think is that special ingredient, that special thing that helps the school to thrive? Of course, there are many things, but what is it that you'd like to contribute to our library of ideas on that topic?
Maybe I could throw in a little curveball here by saying,
okay,
the one thing from the work that we've done in schools that I think really helps a school to thrive is the acknowledgement, recognition of the value in showing and valuing vulnerability. Vulnerability in leaders, vulnerability in teaching staff, and also vulnerability among students. We are all vulnerable. And many times we ignore the fact that we are vulnerable. You know, every time I pitch an idea to you, Russell, or I say something in a meeting that may be contrary to a perceived consensus, I take a risk. I am vulnerable. But what I am doing is that I'm contributing perhaps something new, something innovative to that particular event and setting. If a school has a culture of recognizing and valuing being vulnerable, bringing your whole self to work and bringing your experiences, whatever those experiences might be in your life, of being different, of viewing things differently, that is welcomed in a school, then that will feed into much stronger leadership, not leadership that is narrow focused and only has a very fixed sense of what success looks like, but is flexible in that, and being able to be reflective in your approaches and say, am I doing this to the best ability of the institution, or can we do it in a slightly different way? That requires showing vulnerability and showing authenticity. That's a huge part of strong leadership and strong inclusive leadership. You see people and you get to know people in a much different way. And that, I think, contributes hugely to a school thriving in how it takes decisions, what direction it goes, what vision it has for the future, and so on and so forth.
It doesn't sit though. It doesn't. This idea. I mean, obviously, vulnerability can mean different things, and it's not exactly the same as authenticity, is it? Necessary. At least, maybe you regard the two as similar, but I think a lot of leaders find it. I mean, I would regard myself as a very authentic leader, but I don't know. Maybe I don't know. Maybe I make myself vulnerable as well. But I mean, I find it, as you know, I find the area of, maybe I'm making myself vulnerable now. I find the area of some of the language quite difficult around diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I sometimes, I know I'm not alone in that. And in my conversations with leaders of schools, certainly in this country, I think it is an area that a lot of us kind of struggle with a bit, if I can put it like that. I mean, not because we don't believe in its value, but I think sometimes it's just quite hard to know how to approach it. I don't know if you understand what I'm saying, if you can maybe help me and help others.
I absolutely understand what you're saying, because I think that mentality and that vulnerability that you are showing is perhaps the majority of the clients that we're working with. A senior leadership team nowadays, and it's strengthened by the very recent research by Warwick University that was published I think yesterday, which still shows that 50% of primary schools don't have any ethnic minority teachers. That's 50% of all primary schools. That's our biggest client base that we're working with, and many people from majority backgrounds. So white men like you and I, we very often feel that it's not for us to really be discussing, or that it is a subject that we know very little about. So therefore, I shouldn't really put my oar in, because if I do, I may make a mistake, and then everything will blow up. So of course, people have become very nervous about talking about this subject. And this is where the vulnerability comes in. If you can sit in that vulnerability and say, I don't have perfect knowledge here, I have a particular background that has conditioned me in a particular way, but I am ready to listen. I think when you've done that, then you've taken a big leap into having these sensitive conversations about race, about disability, about gender, about sexual orientation, and so on and so forth. But also about yourself. Who am I? And that is something that we do lots of at All in Education.
Well, you kind of read my mind, I think, because I wanted to. We've only got a few minutes left, unfortunately, but I do want to just ask you a bit about that. So, I mean, this isn't always how these conversations go, but and it's not because I want to give you an opportunity to plug the company particularly, but I think it would be helpful to know in a practical sense, you know, in a real sense, what do you do? What do you and your colleagues at All in Education do to help schools, if not get this right, then get this better, you know, to develop the right sort of mindset and possibly some of the right behaviors and systems? Because it's not just about mindset, is it? It's also about carrying it, following it through and taking action. So what do you guys do in a practical sense to help schools get this right?
We've, apart from the audits that we do of recruitment processes, where we go into detail about process, and what people do and behaviors within a recruitment process. And then when we do practical work around developing a more diverse and more inclusive curriculum, when we look at policies to see how effective policies are when it comes to equality, diversity, and inclusion. If we take that to one side, because that's one piece of work, perhaps the biggest changes that we see is the work that we do around changing mentalities and creating a space where people like you, Russell, feel comfortable showing that vulnerability and being able to reflect on yourself. So the first question that I ask in our, what I call our flagship leadership and strategy development program is, can you reflect on a time when you have felt excluded? And I don't think I've come across a single person who has not been able to answer that question. So when you sit in a position where you have felt excluded, how did that make you feel in that moment? What impact did that have on you? How you performed? And then also, what was your response to that? Because people have different responses to feeling excluded. They sometimes very desperately try to fit themselves in again. So for example, if I go somewhere and the accent of the people around me is very different, what do? I feel like the odd one out with an accent like the one that I have. What do? Do I assimilate? Do I try to fix my accent to their accent? That might be one of the strategies. Another strategy is, I don't really belong here. So you exclude yourself. So you might be with an employer for 2 or 3 months.
You don't say anything.
You don't say anything. You don't. You just exclude yourself. Or if it's an incident where you have perhaps been excluded and being told you don't really fit in here, or the way that you're communicating or the way that you are taking decisions, that doesn't really fit in here. Well, then perhaps you confront it and you say, actually, this is something that I do think I'm right on. So we all respond differently to instances of feeling excluded, but it does have an impact on us. And that question usually throws up a lot more questions about belonging, inclusion, and exclusion. And we as institutions, we are by definition exclusionary. We need to be. An organization is by definition exclusionary. It is for us as institutions and also as leaders to draw those lines and to say, we are currently excluding a certain section of let's say, teachers who are out there who may come and join our school in a recruitment process, but many of them might feel excluded by the way that we are presenting ourselves on our website, what people know about us, and so on and so forth. So it just generates a lot of questions that can be answered, and that's when you start to get a different direction of travel for a school in how it can change its behaviors, its policies, its procedures.
Okay, good. No, that's really helpful, and it's interesting we can all, I think, perhaps after watching this, reflect on that question and our answers and how it made us feel. So that's something I'd like, if it's possible, just in the sort of, goodness, like less than a minute we've got left, really. Maybe to leave our viewers with or listeners or both with maybe one or two other little tips, or is that okay? I don't want to kind of dilute the importance of your work or diminish the importance of your work, but are there like one or two little quick bits of advice you could give people, or things they could be doing when they're driving or when they're out and about, just to get themselves into the right mindset, if that makes sense?
Yeah,
Just to
maybe
finish
these are
off
not
with.
for the maybe these are not for the for driving, but they
Okay.
are quick.
Okay.
The first one is to make as part of your weekly routine to read news by and for minority groups. Two of those examples is Pink News and
Yeah.
also The Voice. So Pink News is for and by the LGBTQ plus community, and The Voice is for the African Caribbean community.
Okay.
This is really important because this is news that is within that community. What is currently important, what is happening within that community nationally and also internationally. Second tip,
Okay.
for an inclusive leader, it is important to keep an audit of the time that you spend with different people. If you audit over the course of 2 weeks who you are spending time with, you can then start to ask questions about patterns in that. Is it disproportionately a group of people that you're spending time with? Now, thinking about professionally at work,
Yeah.
are you spending disproportionate amount of time based on common private interests, for example? So if I'm really into football, I am talking mostly to people in the workforce who just like football. Or do I veer towards people who are extroverted? And then I forget those who are introverted. So as a leader, to have a really good sense of who I'm spending time with, this is important for who influences you, your decision making, but also for optics. Who do people see me valuing in the
Yeah.
workforce?
Yeah. It's a good point.
So I think from time audit and reading pieces of news from communities that you don't necessarily
Mm.
belong to, communities that you don't belong to.
Well, I'm going to try both of those things. Or actually, no. If you were Yoda, then you would say, what is it? Do not try, just do. So I will do both of those things. And the first one, your Pink News and The Voice, actually reminds me of a time in my life which I am going to try and get back to, when I actually did something quite similar. I used to buy magazines on topics that I had no interest in once a
Good
month,
one.
like angling and golf and sailing and the things that I just knew nothing about. And so yeah, I need to get back into that habit, I think. So thank you. Ewan, I'm so sorry because we have to bring this to an end now. I'm really sorry, but
And thank you for inviting me.
no, it's a pleasure. It's always great to see you, as you know. So thank you very much. Thank you for you've given me a lot to think about, and also a few practical things to do as well. And I'm sure you've had the same effect on the people watching this. So thank you again.
Thank you, Russell.